Thank you so much for joining us for another town hall. I am really excited to get this opportunity to chat with you. Sorry that we are running a little late. It's been a really busy couple of days here. I want to just thank you again for spending some time with us and hearing directly from me on the happenings of Washington, D.C. and the things that we've been able to do on behalf of our constituents and the work that is getting done here on behalf of the people in Washington. Before we dive into Q&A and answer your questions directly, I wanted to give you quick updates. And we actually have a PowerPoint presentation. So Nikki, take it away.
Sure. Well, thank you so much. The PowerPoint is up here rolling. Did you want to run through the stuff in the Build Back Better Act, or did you want, or did you want me to go ahead and do that?
No, that's fine. Thank you so much, Nikki. So as many of you know, in the House, we have been fortunate enough to get the Build Back Better Act done. In the Build Back Better Act, I know a lot of people have been hearing about the dollar amount, but many people don't know what's actually in it. So I wanted to give you a quick rundown of what are some of the key things that are in the Build Back Better Act. We have been able to include childcare, fully subsidized childcare for low-income families, and cap childcare expenses for middle income families so that they're not going to pay anything more than 7% of their income, which is really exciting for so many of our families. And that will essentially make it universal for a lot of them. Preschool, we've included that provision as well in the Build Back Better Act. It creates a nationwide preschool program for 3- and 4-year-olds. I know that as a mom, that was a big challenge for me when I was raising my little ones, and I know so many families are going to get the opportunity to take advantage of that. We've also have been able to fight and get some really great climate provisions in the Build Back Better Act. We have an investment of $555 billion for clean energy, electric vehicle technology and subsidies, and the civilian climate corps. And it will also have sustainable domestic manufacturing for so many people in our district and across the country. I know that addressing climate change and dealing with the environmental crisis in this country and globally has been a priority. So we're really excited to have this provision. We're going to continue to fight for it and make sure that it stays in the Senate and it ultimately gets to be included in the bill that passes so that the president can sign it. We've also been able to do some really important work in regards to healthcare expansion. This bill allows Medicare to negotiate drug pricing, cap drug pricing for seniors at $2,000 a year. It adds hearing benefits, and the one piece that we are all really excited for, and it's really important to Minnesotans, is the fact that insulin prices will be capped at $35 per month for all families across the country and individuals as well. It also caps drug pricing increases to inflation, which is going to be important going forward. As many of you know, we were able to get child tax credits in the American Rescue Plan that was passed at the beginning of the year. And so many families have been able to benefit from that. And this bill, the Build Back Better Act, extends the current tax credit for middle and low income families. We've also been able to get family and medical leave. It establishes 4 weeks of paid family leave and medical leave. I know that for industrialized countries across the world, we are the only one that doesn't provide this benefit to its residents and citizens. And we're really excited to at least begin the process of providing some relief in that regard. We have an investment of $170 billion for new affordable housing and home ownership programs. There's also provisions that are included in regards to immigration. It creates a pathway to citizenship for millions of undocumented Americans, and it addresses the immigration backlog. So this, bill really, those are some of the core things, but there are also many other things that are included, things like $20 billion being invested in higher education, which is really important. I sit on the Education and Labor Committee as the only House member of the Minnesota delegation. It's been really important for me to fight for resources to make sure our young people are able to get the education that they need without being burdened with student debt. And this is a great step towards that. We also have $10 billion to prevent childhood hunger. Many of you know that I've introduced 2 pieces of legislation to address childhood hunger and ways in which we can eradicate that. The 2 pieces of legislation that I've introduced address the school meals program. In the first COVID related legislation that we did back on March 27th of 2020, I had introduced the Meals Act, which was implemented as part of the CARES Act, that has been able to provide universal school meals to our children during the pandemic. And we continue to fight to make sure states are asking for those subsidies, and will continue to provide those meals to our young children, because childhood hunger is real in the United States and it needs to be addressed. The Build Back Better Act also includes $20 billion for green jobs, and that will go to addressing big portions of the climate crisis that exists, in addressing the climate crisis that exists in this country, but mainly the creation of the Civilian Climate Corps, which will conserve our public lands, help build community resilience, and create more good-paying union jobs, which is going to be really exciting because a lot of our young people can take advantage of these jobs while they tend to the environment. So I gave you an overview of some of the things that are in the Build Back Better Act that I thought might be really important for the people of the Fifth. I also wanted to give you an idea of some of the things that we've been working on that actually made it into the Build Back Better Act. As many of you know, last Congress, I introduced the Zero Waste Act, and all of the eligible provisions of that could be included in the Build Back Better Act have been included. There is going to be an investment of $750 million in recycling and composting infrastructure programs and materials. It is going to expand domestic manufacturing to use recycled goods in the United States and limit wasteful byproducts of manufacturing. It promotes waste reduction as a primary goal, and there's going to be $300 million that is earmarked for investment in communities of color and low-income communities. And the way that we structured this legislation is that There is going to be grants program that communities, local municipalities, and states can tap into and invest in the programs that they've already created as part of the legislation that they are working on local level. I also introduced legislation to address some of the housing issues that exist in our community, and the Community Restoration and Revitalization Fund is all the eligible provisions of that are included in the Build Back Better Act. It invests $3 billion in a new program to promote community-led civic infrastructure projects, affordable housing, and economic development activities in distressed communities. Of this amount, $500 million is set aside for community land trust and shared equity home ownership programs. The grants that this program creates can be extracted by local communities to address the needs that they have and the programs that they want to implement in their community. So there is some flexibility in that regard, and we're really proud of the fact that these two pieces of legislation that we've been working on have been included in the Build Back Better Act. So every year, we send out a survey to the district to hear about things that they want us to prioritize and legislation they want us to introduce. And we know that for many of them, education is a top priority, housing is a top priority, environmental justice is a top priority, and healthcare is a top priority. And this legislation will address some of the priorities that our community has and has been asking for us to address, things like affordable housing. We know that the Twin Cities has one of the worst housing shortages in the nation, and this disproportionately impacts people of color and low-income families. And so the fact that there is going to be a once-in-a-lifetime generational investment in housing of $170 billion is just extraordinary, and I can't tell you just how important it is for me to be able to fight and make sure that that was included in the Build Back Better Act. We know that environmental justice and addressing the climate crisis is a top priority for the folks in Minnesota's 5th, and we know that Minnesota is warming faster than most other states, and we are experiencing one of the worst droughts in our state's history. We just experienced one of the worst droughts in our state's history, and to be able to have $550 billion being invested in addressing the climate crisis is an important aspect of this legislation, and why we have been fighting so hard for it. Again, childhood poverty and addressing education, making sure that our children's bellies are fed before we feed their brains has been a priority of mine. And we know that over 10% of children in Minnesota live below the poverty line. So to be able to help with things like childcare, with preschool, to make sure that the child tax credit is there, putting money in the pockets of families, making sure that there is resources to help put food on the table with the money that's going to addressing childhood hunger is extraordinary. And this is why we continue to say, this legislation is transformative, and so many of our communities will benefit from it. Paid family leave has been a priority of mine even when I was in the Minnesota House, and we are lucky at this point to be able to see that become a mainstream issue, where so many people here in Congress, both in the House and the Senate, are fighting for it. It was included in the president's address. It's been a priority of his. I know that we wanted to have a little bit more time in the legislation, but for the over half of the 5th district that doesn't have access to paid medical and family leave, to be able to get 4 weeks is essential, and we'll continue to fight for that. Immigration, as an immigrant to this country and someone who knows that there's a lot of work that needs to get done in regards to our immigration system. This is a huge step that we are taking in this legislation. We know over 95,000 Minnesotans who have lived here for decades are still undocumented, and these are our neighbors. They are really valuable members of our community, and we have to do everything that we can to make sure that they are able to stay in their homes, the only home that most of them have known. So in regards to legislation accomplishments, we have been able to pass 8 bills and amendments into law through the legislative process. We have gotten 47 bills and amendments passed out of the House, including some of the ones that we just discussed. We have been able to introduce 104 bills and amendments so far, and we have co-sponsored 1,084 bills. We've been able to engage with our constituents, address their needs, and we've been able to do, over 150,000 correspondence with our constituents. We really appreciate the fact that you all call in and write to our office, whether it is the DC office or it is the in-district office, that you visit us and make appointments and utilize the resources that we have and that we can offer on your behalf. We are your liaison for the federal government, and we are here to make sure that your questions are answered and that your problems are solved. Our office is your office, and we are just delighted to have the opportunity to be able to do that. So here are some overviews of recent bills that we've been able to introduce. A joint resolution of disapproval in the arms sales that is being offered to Saudi Arabia. We think that while the war in Yemen continues to be waged by Saudi Arabia, that we should not partake in that, and we shouldn't be selling them weapons to advance the destruction of a nation and the lives that are being lost. We're also working really hard to make sure that there is an exercise over the oversight responsibilities that we have. And so we've introduced legislation to make sure that we can exercise the oversight that is provided to the Foreign Affairs Committee in regards to arms sales and to Congress, so that the president unilaterally and the administration isn't doing this regardless of what administration is in the White House. We've also introduced legislation to honor the Prince of Minnesota with the Congressional Gold Medal And it is legislation that was introduced with partnership with our senior senator, Amy Klobuchar. It is co-sponsored by the whole delegation of Minnesota, both Democrats and Republicans. And we look forward to continuing to honor Prince's legacy and find ways to collaborate with our colleagues, both sides of the aisle. As many of you know, it's been really important to us to combat Islamophobia here in the United States and globally. That's why we've introduced the Combating International Islamophobia Act. It will require the State Department to create an envoy that helps monitor and combat Islamophobia. We know that the Human Rights Human Rights Council of the UN said that Islamophobia has reached a epidemic level. And it needs to be addressed by every state across the globe. And we want to do our part here in the United States. We've also introduced the Affordable Housing Opportunity Made Equitable Act, the HOME Act. This is a legislation that will create a comprehensive policy to tackle the affordable housing crisis that is threatening families in Minnesota and throughout the United States. So it's going to be a busy week and a half or so in Congress. We're obviously going to work to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to avoid a government shutdown. The current government funding expires Friday, December 3rd, and we are working to pass a continuing resolution that funds the government at the last level of funding that it had. And we'll continue to update you all on how that process is being made, because we know that there are so many families that are going to be impacted, and it's important that our government continues to operate and work for the people of this country. We're also looking to raise the debt ceiling. Congress must raise the debt ceiling before the Department of Treasury runs out of borrowing authority on December 15th. We have been, this has been an ongoing process, and we are going to tackle this this week as well, and we'll keep you updated on the progress that we are making. We're also going to Congress is also going to be working on passing the National Defense Authorization Act. The Senate has that piece of legislation, and we'll keep you updated on the progress of that as well. All right, so now to our favorite part. We will take some of your questions, and Nikki will get people set up for that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Congresswoman. So if you'd like to ask a question, if you would be willing to type that up into the chat, my colleagues and I will be adding people to the video and audio feed to be able to ask their questions, and the Congresswoman will answer them. And so first up, we have Joshua Hudek from the Sierra Club. I'm gonna go ahead and get you added here so that you can...
Actually, there's a question here before that's asked that I would love to address. People are asking, how can I say this is a once-in-a-lifetime investment? The once-in-a-lifetime investment is in the affordable housing. We have never invested $170 billion in housing. And so that investment is a once in a lifetime investment. And it's something that we are really proud of to be able to fight for. And we just hope that that number doesn't go down in the Senate, and that is ultimately included in the last piece of legislation that comes out of this. I just saw that there were a lot of people in the chat that were asking what did I mean by once in a lifetime investment. Some of the other things might not be once in a lifetime investment. There's still a lot of work to do. It is an investment, but not once in a lifetime investment. But the housing piece is once in a lifetime investment. We have not made that kind of investment. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So Joshua, I'm gonna have you on as a panelist. Yeah, take it away.
Thank you, Congressman. Women for taking my question. My name is Joshua Hodak. I'm a constituent in South Minneapolis and also representing the Sierra Club Minnesota North Star chapter. I assume you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. So appreciate all your work on on this legislation, the Building Back Better legislation. But I wanted to just kind of raise some red flags around the transportation piece of it. There's a lot of new federal highway money in the pipeline that is coming to Minnesota and states across the country. And a recent New York Times article brought up about a story that's happening in New Orleans, but it's directly relevant to Minneapolis and our district. The New York Times article is called "One Historic Black Neighborhood's Stake in the Infrastructure Bill." It brought up the national conversation that we're having about the impact of highways, both currently and historically, in urban communities like Minneapolis, and the fresh traction we have as the country is confronting its history of racism and racist policies, especially, of course, after the murder of George Floyd last year. And these campaigns are taking on new urgency as the president has made racial justice and climate change part of his domestic agenda. This is a quote from the article. So my question is, as we look at this new federal highway money that actually has a significant potential to worsen climate emissions and environmental justice if we're building out and expanding polluting highways, especially in urban areas. What restrictions might we have to prevent this from happening, especially on two projects that are happening right in the district, the Rethinking I-94 project and the Highway 252 and I-94 projects in Minneapolis and going up into Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center. MnDOT's targeting some of this funding for a land bridge in St. Paul, which is fantastic to mitigate the wrongs of the Rondo neighborhood. But I'm just wondering, what we can do to direct funding to improve these projects and not add more polluting traffic to already burdened environmental justice communities.
Thank you, Joshua. You really do ask an important question, and one many of us have been mulling over for a long time. We know that transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gases in Minnesota. And when climate change is already disproportionately impacting communities of color, we have to think critically, right, about these things. We know that there is, a significant improvement to the livelihoods of people that happen when we do actually make investments in these kind of infrastructures. And I know that the 94 the I-94 cap that is happening in St. Paul's, one that we wanted to duplicate in Minneapolis with the Cedar Seward neighborhood to reconnect it. And it's one that we will eventually do in the next session, hopefully. Next year, I think we will be able to do that in the transportation legislation. We weren't able to do both, as you can understand, in this one. I think one of the key ways that we can reduce the impacts that highways have on our communities is to try to make sure that we are creating convenient ways for public transportation and alternatives for our communities, right? So that they are not utilizing the interstate as much. I'm eager to hear, the ways in which our communities are locally thinking about that. Some of the initiatives that have come up. I know that there's some interesting initiatives in North Minneapolis that are happening, and I think that there's just really some good opportunities for us to divert some of the resources to some of these initiatives and make sure that the resources that we have are being used to help advance our communities without creating environmental impacts. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that, Joshua. So I just got, unfortunately, with the schedule for votes tonight, it's looking like we're only going to have time for the Congresswoman to take one more question before she has to head out of the office. I'm looking to see, looks like I see Russ Adams, you have your hand raised, so I'm going to go ahead and promote you to panelist. And if you would like to turn on your video and your audio and ask your question, that would be great.
Okay, so sorry, it took me a little while to do that. And my question was in the Q&A window, and I'm not seeing it now, so I can just do it from memory. So first of all, Congresswoman, just a point of personal preference or privilege here. I just want to thank you for your service and for being our representative in the 5th District. You have been subjected to all kinds of insults and disrespectful behavior, which I find pretty despicable. And at all times, you've really maintained your dignity and stayed above board. It's not easy to do, and you probably don't get complimented for that enough. And you probably don't hear from your constituents enough to say that we don't appreciate that. And I may not agree with you with every one of your issue stance, but I think in a civil society, we don't treat people that way, whether they're a congressperson or an ordinary citizen. I haven't had that opportunity to say this to you, and that's why I took the personal privilege. You and I know each other. I now work with the Lake Street Council. I've been tracking the Build Back Better bill quite a bit. There was a section in it that I was glad to see you highlighted, the Community Revitalization Fund.
Restoration and Revitalization Fund.
The White House called it the Community Revitalization Fund. The House expanded it a little bit, but dropped some of the funding. That's a really great section of the bill. It seems to weigh very heavily on affordable housing, community land trusts, and trying to prevent gentrification. These are all great things. There is language in it about civic infrastructure, which I can't find a definition, but the White House had a very broad concept of that related to economic development, particularly in BIPOC communities, and helping BIPOC entrepreneurs and businesses. So really the meat of the question is, how do we apply funding from a Build Back Better bill, which could easily describe what we're trying to do on Lake Street in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder and the businesses that were damaged and the properties destroyed, and this is happening in other sections of the 5th District as well, how do we find the funding to help that rebuild and reconstruction? Because as always happens in Washington, they have very strict parameters for how to interpret the funding programs, and in the implementation is often where we lose the opportunity to kind of apply the money and the heart or the spirit of what you were trying to do to a place like Lake Street. So this is a longer conversation. I'd be happy to have more with you and your staff, but Build Back Better could easily be our motto on Lake Street. So how do we apply that?
Well, first of all, Russ, thank you. And yes, I do actually hear quite a lot from our constituents, and it does fulfill me, and it helps me continue to do the work that needs to be done and stay focused. So thank you, and thank you to the residents of Minnesota's 5th for trusting me and for honoring me with the privilege of serving you. I think that, you know, in the original bill that we had, that this is taken, right, like this is out of the legislation that I introduced. The idea behind it was that once the funds would go to the states and local municipalities, that they can then target it to the programs that need the investment. And so there is obviously going to be a follow-up in regards to rulemaking. What we have learned throughout COVID, with all the investments that we've been able to make, is that sometimes there's a lot that you have to do in following up when you are generating this much investment, to say, you know, here's where you need flexibility, here's where you need to allow communities to be able to guide the ways in which these resources need to be used. We know that the pandemic has laid a lot of the ills of our communities bare. We know that the unrest of last summer has created tremendous burden in a lot of our communities. So I want to commend you, actually, and the Lake Street Council for the innovative ways that you all are working to rebuild. And I do believe that we will eventually build back better in Minneapolis. There's just a lot of good news coming out of Lake Street and everything that's happening there. And I just think that when this legislation is implemented, that there's work that people like you and I can do together to make sure the resources are directed where they need to go, with the help of our mayor and governor and all the other good people that we have in Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I know boss, if it's all right, maybe just one more quick question, and then I know you got to run for your 6 p.m. engagement. So Joe, Herbies, I hope I'm not mispronouncing that terribly, just added you here, and so please feel free to turn on your camera and microphone and go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Joanne Urbis. Thank you very much, Congressman Omar, for taking my question. I represent the Minnesota Statewide Independent Living Council. We serve the 8 centers for independent living in Minnesota and promote independent living for people with disabilities. My question to you is on the affordable housing. And we often hear and know that there is a need for affordable housing, but my question is, what about affordable, accessible housing for people with disabilities? I know of a woman who resided in your district, she had disability, and she had 3 children with disabilities and was not able to find family housing for her family that was affordable and accessible to meet the needs of herself and her family. So my question is, in looking at affordable housing, is there discussion about affordable, accessible housing, and how can we participate in that discussion? Thank you.
Yeah, Joanne, I think that there is a longer conversation and a follow-up. Maybe we should do a roundtable on this with Secretary Fudge to sort of look at ways in that they can sort of hear from community and better implement this legislation once it's passed. But accessibility are two things, right? We think about having access to the affordable housing, and then we also think about making the infrastructure piece and creating housing that is accessible for folks that are living with disability. And both of those things are things that we are talking about, we are looking at, and we'll continue to have a conversation around. Right now, that is embedded in the way that the legislation is drafted. Obviously, there will have to be guidelines and requirements that are set up once the funds are available and are being released for communities, and that's where your voice and the conversations that we can have with the secretary are going to be important. So I'm going to have Natasha, who heads our housing portfolio, reach out to you so that we can have this roundtable once the funds are ready to be released.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, and I will say before I end, Joanne, I don't know if you're still able to hear me, but we have a housing task force for the Minnesota's 5th. And for you or anyone else that is doing work around housing that wants to be involved, or at least get readouts of some of the things that we have been working on and advocating for across the state and country, we would love to include you. So please reach out to Natasha Rice in our office to get involved. Thank you. Is that it?
All right, that's it. So I just wanted to say a couple housekeeping things. I dropped my email address in our office line in the chat, and so please shoot me an email if you have any other questions. Also, for any of you who put questions in the chat, we'll make sure to follow up with you. We have your contact information from the Zoom registration. I just wanted to share that. All right, back to you, boss.
Well, thank you, everyone. I really do treasure this 1 hour that we do get to do the town hall, whether it is virtual or in person in the district. It gives me an opportunity to give you updates and hear directly from you. I do apologize that we haven't been able to utilize the full hour. We usually have these town halls run a little longer because there's flexibility in time. But tonight just happens to be a night where we have votes and a lot of running around that we are doing. Hopefully we'll schedule this a little better. But again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And like I always say, it is an honor to serve you and be your voice in Congress and co-govern with you. So feel free to reach out to our office with ideas and with questions. And again, remember, our office is a resource for you and a liaison for the federal government. So use us. Bye, everyone. Have a great night.